Hey there, this is Dan. You're watching the Salty Sea, and I am back with my series on lists for every single faction in the game. We're doing the second half of Chaos today. You can see the first half over there, or I'll link somewhere down in the description. I've got a new computer today and a new webcam, so you should be able to see me a little bit more clearly. I'll be trying to post my videos in beautiful 1080p now, but we'll see how that goes. Let's get into it. First, a quick reminder, since it's been a while since I put out one of these. I'm going to do 2 to 4 lists per faction, like kind of a mix of competitive and silly lists. No out of print underworlds are going to be in these videos. My attitude with that is, if you are very well endowed with underworlds models, congratulations, you can wear really tight pants and impress everyone. Otherwise, I'm just going to kind of leave it by the wayside here. Honestly, GW's approach to integrating them in the game has been a little bit haphazard recently, and so I'm kind of putting them to the side. The main Chaos Soup competitive guide, because that's kind of how list building works, is by Grand Alliance, more than by faction. That was in the first Chaos video. Just the quick recap is Chimeras plus cheap stuff. If you really want to win a tournament, that's probably where you should go. But after that, there are a lot of really cool chonkers in Chaos. Chaos is maybe a little bit lighter on sort of really clever support spells, but heavier on really interesting ways to sort of just deal damage and project power, especially in the high 200s points cost. And so that can be a really great thing for your options and all kinds of soup lists. And you'll see a few of those in those videos, in this video, to get what I mean. Let's get into Skaven right away. The big highlight for Skaven is they have the best combat monsters in the game. Storm Fiends and Rat Ogres are incredible. Now, Destruction does have Titans that are a little bit scarier in a one-on-one battle than what Storm Fiends and Rat Ogres do, but the Skaven ones have move 5, so they can get themselves into position without using up abilities or dice to do so. Now, of course, Destruction, has really good dice abilities for doing that, but this lets you kind of put your dice in other places, which is really nice. They've got great defensive combos too. Storm Vermin have a really cool playstyle where they make it so you can't kill a leader if the Storm Vermin is nearby, which means you have to go fight the Storm Vermin, and they can have shields, which can give them toughness 5, and that can just be a really nice thing to have. Skaven also have a really good Underworlds team, so if you were lucky enough to buy them 4 years ago, they have been out of print for ages, but if you can find one, um, that's great. Otherwise, you can do proxies for it, but um, they kind of look a little different than a lot of Skaven, so I think you should really put some effort into your proxies to make them distinguishable from the rest of your warband. Lowlights, man, there are a lot of bad fighters in Skaven. Skaven has a massive roster, and most of them are terrible. Every single cheap fighter other than Storm Vermin is pretty bad on its own. Now, you can, of course, run, say, pack masters for their ability, stuff like that, but for the most part, you're pretty sad about it. Something like Plague Monks are just not what they were in first edition. Also, the best ability on Skaven, which was lead from the back, was really nerfed into the ground, and that means that a lot of their leaders are paying points because they have lead from the back that they really shouldn't be paying anymore because lead from the back just isn't as good anymore. When I think about list building with Skaven, the primary question that I ask myself is, are we going with rat ogres or fiends here? Now, I don't own any regular rat ogres because I don't like the sculpts, so that makes it easy for me. But for most players, that's going to be the question. So I'll start with rat ogres. Where I would go now is a master molder, a rat ogre with warpfire gun, a packmaster with fortitude. Now that is from the new divine blessings edition that came in the latest White Dwarf. You can see in my last video, I will link the description here, a just quick overview of how Divine Blessings work. At the end of list building, if you have extra points in your list, you get to wait until you've seen the mission and deployment, and then you get to add one of these divine blessings to your list. So if you have, say, 15 points left, you can add fortitude to any of your fighters, which gives them +4 wounds. There are other options available too. Fortitude is really nice on that Packmaster because it lets you keep it alive. One of the, things that can happen to you in Skaven is you kind of move up with your Rat Ogre, you set up the combo, and then they snipe your Packmaster off the board. Giving it Fortitude just makes that much more difficult to do. Then you have three Storm Vermin and a Warp Fire Thrower. This is a kind of situation where with Skaven, if you thinking you're going to face objective missions, things like that, it's much easier to have a healthy activation count while using Rat Ogres plus Packmasters. There's kind of a lot more that you can do to keep your sort of numbers up because you're paying 290 points, in this case 305, but usually 290 points for two fighters there, which is really nice. This list also is going to go with one warp fire gun and then a warp fire thrower to give you a lot of ranged ability to kind of pick things off in hunting missions. It's going to be really hard to hide from you. And so this list is going to be just generally really good at those, but have a little more game in an objective mission than maybe a Stormfiend list would. Just kind of a generally pretty powerful approach that a lot of people have had some success with, but Skaven's win rate is still pretty average, and so a lot of people also bring these to say really rumble packy types of tournaments, and Skaven is just not what you want there because our cheap fighters are not good. If you're thinking about more sort of brawl punch-up missions, which is a lot of missions in the game, that's where I think Stormfiends really shine. A Stormfiend will outfight a Roger plus Packmaster combo 1 versus 2, despite costing 20 fewer points. The toughness 5 on them, the greater strength on them, they will grind through Rat Ogres pretty easily, and they will go toe to toe with other big Titan pieces that will also grind through Rat Ogres. And so that's where I really like Plague Priest, two Storm Fiends, one with the Grinder Fists, one with the Doomflayer, three Storm Vermins, and then a Clan Rat. I kind of like the Plague Priest ability. It is not going to be useful in a lot of situations because it's a triple that stops anyone from being able to use abilities within 3 inches of it. But in the matchups where that is good, it can be very good. And most matchups, when it's not good, you're going to be using your dice to just onslaught your Storm Fiends anyway, or rampage your Storm Fiends anyway. And so you're not that worried about not getting the most traction out of the Plague Priest ability. And then the profile isn't awful when you are using it, right? Getting that toughness 4 on your leader is kind of nice compared to the toughness 3 you usually have. And of course, the Storm Fiends are going to be soaking up most of the attention anyway. Again, much like Rat Ogre, Skaven just excel at any kind of big punching right now that needs to happen because these two Storm Fiends are going to be completely overwhelming in that regard. If you are a little bit crazy, and I have tried this out, you can substitute those three Storm Vermin for one of the ranged Storm Fiends as well. And that can be a pretty insane little situation you can find yourself in. Um, so there's a lot you can go there. But those are sort of the two celebrated ways to make Skaven. And of course, you can do something in between, something with only one Storm Fiend if you want to bring in an ally and then have another couple bodies. But there, I was kind of wanting to find a third way in this video. And one thing that I've seen a couple folks try out, shout out to Avery, who's a local player in Minnesota, is having double Deathmaster. So here you have two Death Masters. They have this ability Running Death where they get a free move and then they get +1 crit on their for the rest of their activation, I believe. And so if you can set up something within 7 inches, you get a free move, then you're attacking it twice, and you have +1 crit while you're doing it. That can really blow a lot of things off the board. And then I would want to pair them with a Varangard, and then again do three Storm Vermin and a Warp Fire Thrower. That sort of core of three Storm Vermin is kind of how I approach every Skaven list that I go for, just because um, the defensive ability of the Storm Vermin and just man, the rest of the Skaven cheap stuff is in a really tough spot. So, even finding this third way, I still think that Skaven need to be an elite force. But this one is a little bit different than the others because you've got three different assassins on the board with the two Death Masters, and Varanguards are absolutely an assassin piece. Then you've got an archer on the field, so nothing is really safe from you. But then you've also still got a decent amount of toughness. You're not as hard to chew through as this list, where you've got, five different T5 models, and of course, the ridiculous number of wounds on the Storm Fiends. But the Varengard can, hold up hard threats and make them have a really difficult time chewing through it. And then the Storm Vermin can do that, so you can be a little bit tougher to remove than most Skaven lists are. One thing you'll find with Rat Ogre lists is you have this incredible activation advantage with your abilities and maybe greater numbers, and Rat Ogres are great at chewing through most things. But sometimes if you're against sort of some high strength titans, you can find that they actually chew through your rat ogres pretty quickly. And that's something that the other two lists won't have to deal with. One maybe weakness of this one is it is a very dice hungry warband. Death Masters are wanting to use Running Death, which is a triple. The Varengard is wanting to use a double. The Storm Vermins are wanting to use a double. And so you're going to have to be very disciplined about which ones you use in any given scenario. Now let's get into Slaanesh, and I'll start with Slaanesh Sybarites, the Mortals. Their highlights, they have memorable fighters at every points cost, whether it's the Bliss Brews, all of the sort of armored in-between fighters, the Twin Souls and the Myrmidesh, and then you have Fiend Bloods and the Slakehorn Leader. So that can be really nice. They have the best selection of what I call, platonic Warcry. It's the thing that when new people get into the game, they're kind of sold on the idea that this is what a Warcry fighter is supposed to be, which is these sort of 100 to 140 point, maybe 90 to 140 point fighters that you see a ton of them in the bespoke war bands that have, you know, enough wounds that they're really difficult to one-shot kill, enough fighting power that something happens every time you attack with them, but also nothing sort of truly bonkers is going to happen with them either. Unfortunately, these are the types of fighters that are have generally been the weakest in the game since the game has come out, which is a whole separate issue that I've talked about in other videos and I don't need to get into here. But Slaanesh has the best selection of them of any faction in the game. Now, another highlight or another maybe reason to pick them up, nobody plays them despite brand new sculpts. So no one's going to go in against you feeling like they know what they're getting into, feeling like they know what all their abilities are. People are going to be kind of maybe wrong-footed a little bit when they play against you because they won't really know what's coming. And they also have a really excellent Underworlds team where they get a 195 point fighter with a really amazing ability. They've got a great 105 point fighter in there. Just a lot to really like that's in that Underworlds team. Some of the problems, the chaff is a huge pain to collect. It comes one to a box. So if you really want to play a chaff spam warband, which Slaanesh are not bad at, uh, it's a huge pain to collect it. You're going to need to do a ton of converting. It's going to take you ages. I don't envy anybody that that pain. Uh, and also, having all of these sort of platonic ideal fighters, you're the best faction in the game at the weakest thing you can do in the game. Puts you in an odd spot. Also, because nobody plays them, you won't have any really tournament lists to compare notes with. So you'll be just brewing on your own. You won't be kind of being able to collaborate with people you've never met via tournament results. Let's get into brewing with them. I actually play a decent amount of Slaanesh Sybarites, so when I say nobody plays them, there is someone I play them, though I haven't brought them to a tournament. There is someone who brings them to Utah tournaments every once in a while. But my usual list, the list I've been playing since last fall, off and on, not a ton, but in my casual games, is a Slangor Slakehorn, two Slangor Fiendblood, a Myrmidesh Painbringer, and a Twin Soul with Lash. This is a very solid list, kind of using the best abilities at your fingertips, maybe the best sort of, at least the ones that stand out the most of the sort of mid-range fighters. Um, Off Meta Musings had a video about Slaanesh once, and I think he ended up coming to this exact same conclusion completely separately of me having no idea that I've been playing Slaanesh this way. And so I think this is a list that jumps out at you when you start to dig into the numbers. of Slaanesh, and it's a very solid list. It's not tier one, but you have to be bringing a pretty competitive list to go and beat it. It can do a lot of things. It can fight really well. It can hunt things down really well. Seven fighters is not great for objective missions. One kind of meme list that you can go with them is really leaning into what this faction is all about with the mid-range fighters. You could have a Shard Speaker, which has a very cool little AoE debuff ability, and then four Myrmidesh Painbringers, a Twin Soul with Lash, two Twin Souls with Blades, and a Twin Soul with Cleaver. Those are just all pretty solid fighters. They're just all in that horrible zone of things where just kind of general war cry discourages you from playing them. So it's likely not going to be the most competitive way to play them, but it is going to be a very memorable way to play them. And you have nine fighters, so it's not like you're completely out of luck for some sort of objective mission. This is a pretty sweet little list, in my opinion. If you told me that I had to go 3-1 at a tournament with Slaanesh or else, this is what I would play. I would start with a Myrmidesh Painmaster. They're the toughness 5, fairly cheap fighter, but a decent amount of wounds at toughness 5, so hard to remove. I've played them a few times and I've been really impressed with what you get for 155. Then I'd play an Ogroid Myrmidon. I'd play a Lord of Plagues. I'd bring two Blissbrew Homunculi, two Painmasters, and a Raptorix. This list gives you a ton of tools at your disposal and is maybe an intro into how I approach Chaos Soup in general, right? So this gives you two different move 5 fighters in the Myrmidon and the Raptorix, so you can get around the board. If you're worried about sort of deployment points giving you need to go really far for treasures, you can replace that Raptorisk with a Chaos Warhound at 85 points. It's the same points cost. But I generally prefer the Raptorisk for most missions because most of the time move 5 is all you need, and you get a lot more other stats on the Raptorisk. But beyond the two move 5 fighters, you've also got four toughness 5 fighters, so you can be really hard to remove. It has two fighters who can go toe to toe with anything. The Lord of Plagues is only toughness 4, but it is got a ton of wounds. It's move 3, so it's very slow, but once it gets there, at 170 points, a Lord of Plagues can go toe to toe with most 250 point fighters in the game. It just has to get there. Now, that can be an issue, but the rest of your warband is a little bit quicker, and so having that one slow fighter is not going to be so much of a problem, and you don't feel bad if you're, say, always giving it a double to have rush, something like that. There's a little bit of synergy here also in that the Lord of Plagues has the strength buff. Dance of the Wailing Blade is +1 damage, and so having extra strength is really nice there. So Lord of Plagues can make your Pain Masters and your Pain Bringers a little bit punchier in situations where you need that. Otherwise, you can just use your dice to sort of boost the attacks on your Myrmidon and your Lord of Plagues. So there's kind of a lot of things going on with this soup list. And like I said before, this is what I would take if I wanted to be competitive with Sybarites. I think this list would be really powerful in most types of missions. Only 8 fighters, so in a pure Rumble Pack scenario, this isn't what you'd take. You would just, well, honestly, you would spam Blissbrew Homunculus with Chimeras. This is the most powerful way to run Slaanesh is with the Chimera, but I'm talking about if I wasn't going to run a Chimera, because I would generally not do that at most tournaments. Um, in a Rumble Pack situation, you would just spam Bliss Brews, but then you're just a worse version of Horns of Hashut, so just play Horns of Hashut. Slaanesh Demons are really cool. They've got great internal synergy in that, Fiends get more from the strength buff than most things would, sort of point for point. The Demonette buff is better than Onslaught for a double, so that can be really nice. They have support heroes that do things that you might actually want, right? Where the Infernal and Rapturous has a cool debuff. The Blissbringer, which is the sort of Fiend of Slaanesh leader, has a lot of really cool utility in that, you can stop things from disengaging from it, so you can really track things down, stuff like that. they have a real definitive playstyle in that they're a really hunter-focused faction without being glass cannons. They can be really hard to run from, but they don't die right away when you touch them, right? Demonettes have 10 wounds instead of 8, which is really nice. So verisimilitude-wise, I think they're the best in the game. They play exactly how you expect them to, even though, they have sort of disruption, which is sort of what Slaanesh is doing in that lore-wise. Slaanesh is like we run fast, we stab as fast as we can, and then we cause some kind of debauchery in your team and some sort of temptation that sort of messes with your head. Um, the disruption is absolutely there with Slaanesh Demons. It did get a lot weaker in second edition, which is too bad, um, but it's still there, and so the playstyle is exactly what the lore says the playstyle is supposed to be, which is really cool. A lowlight is there's no tournament lists for Slaanesh Demons at all. Literally no one plays them. With Slaanesh Sybarites, I said nobody plays them, but some people do. Literally no one takes Slaanesh Demons to tournaments, which is too bad. So you have nothing to kind of go off of. You're also paying for mobility. Everything is just a tad overcosted because the points algorithms these days just really punish fast fighters, and Slaanesh is fast across the board. There's some things you can do with them, and I've been using divine blessings a lot when I brew lists. And so the first one is hashtag blessed Slaanesh. A mighty vice leader. The vice leader profile, all the Slaanesh heroes, or almost all of them, have this uh, 5 attacks on 3 strength, 2 and 4 damage. So giving them mighty to give them +1 strength is really nice because you've got those 5 attacks. So a vice leader really loves having that and becomes much more powerful when you sort of give it that amount. And then vice leaders also are only 20 wounds, so you pay the lesser points cost to get mighty, to get that extra point of strength. Um, Varanguards are a great addition always to anything in Slaanesh. They're also very tough, which is nice. And then a Savage Fiend of Slaanesh. That is +1 crit damage. Fiends have 4 attacks, so your chances of rolling a 6 and getting that +1 damage are pretty decent. Then a regular fiend and 3 demonettes. Um, Mighty is also great with sadistic killers, which gives you +1 damage, so having that extra strength makes sadistic killers more effective. Uh, so just Mighty in general is a really nice divine blessing to give your Slaanesh fighters. And so this is a pretty sweet little list that I think would be a ton of fun. You can also Slaanesh is one of the few factions that you can do on a budget pretty well. Um, Demonette boxes are cheaper than most battle line that is, and you can find them online really easily. Most people, when they try to buy demonettes, if they're willing to spend a lot of money, they go on Creature Caster or they go and pay, hundreds of dollars for Juan Diaz demonettes. So regular demonettes on eBay can occasionally pop up for like really, really cheap. Then you have Seekers, which are another kind of they're light cavalry, but it's a pretty cheap box as well because it's a pretty old sculpt. Um, and so, because those are both pretty inexpensive, you can get a warband that has 2 of them, an Allurer, a Heart Seeker, a Seeker of Slaanesh, and 7 Demonettes. That's 10 fighters. You're going to be in a great spot for objective missions, and you're not going to spend much doing it. You can also do control. That is a playstyle that was really popular with Demons of Slaanesh in first edition. It's harder to do now because the contorted epitome is on a quad now, which is very sad. But Infernal and Rapturous has that debuff. You can start with that. You can do a True Blood, which has that guaranteed net. You have Blissbringers, which have a net, but they have to be engaged to do it. But you can always just disengage after you do it. So you have a Blissbringer and a Fiend, and then 4 Demonettes to round out your activations. You can really mess with your opponent with a list like this. And, it's not like you don't have output either. Demonettes do real damage, Fiends do damage, Blissbringers, they don't do as much damage as you would hope for 205 points, but they still do res- enough damage that the opponent has to be worried about it. And they've got that 8-inch move so they can get anywhere. So I call this Is It Murktide? But this is really, in my mind, the ideal way Slaanesh is supposed to play, where they are running at you, putting sort of real bodies with real damage right in your face while trying to play a control game at the same time. And they hit as hard as the hardest hitting factions in the game? No, they shouldn't. Are they as fast as the fastest factions in the game? No, they should not be. But they should be really close on both of those things, and then with a hint of control, and that gives a really awesome kind of counter burn, uh, Magic the Gathering's blue-red sort of archetype playstyle, and I think that's really cool. If you do want to use the epitome, it's got those 6 attacks and pretty low strength. It's in a really tough place right now in the meta because of counter. But if you give it mighty, that sort of makes it a lot easier. And then if you add, say, a Fomeroid Crusher and a Blazing Lord, those are two really high toughness, really sticky threats that also hit pretty hard. So they can soak up a lot of the opponent's attention, and then your Contorted Epitome is just running around with its 6 attacks, doing a lot. Really good at one-shot killing chaff models, especially if it's getting +1 strength. And so, you can be free to run around killing chaff with your Contorted Epitome while your Crusher and your Blazing Lord maybe take on the harder targets. Also, just a note, producing this video is tough. When you Google Slaanesh Demons, I actually, because I have my new computer, I haven't downloaded Chrome yet, so I was binging Slaanesh Demons, which is even tougher because DeviantArt is like really big with Bing and is much lower on search results with Google for whatever reason. Anyway, you find way more fan art than official art when you search for Slaanesh Demon art. All right, Slaves to Darkness, one of the poster factions of the whole game. Certainly with Warcry. Warcry is a Slaves to Darkness themed game. The big highlights for S2D: list building flexibility is huge. You have great chaff with Marauders. You have plenty of mid-sized fighters, all the Chaos Warrior equivalents. And then Varangar are like one of the more memorable elite fighters in all of Chaos. You've got a great reaction where you heal 3. That's amazing on Marauders. It makes Marauders really difficult to chew through. If you can't one-shot kill Marauders, you can't kill them. I mean, that's all there is to it. And then they have a really wide array of cool leaders where they go all the way up to the Varangard. They've got really good sort of foot slogging combat heroes that are kind of just better bespoke leaders in a lot of situations as far as like aspiring champions, things like that. And then in between, they've got Chaos Lords, they've got Dark Oath War Queens that have those AoE attack buffs, just lots of really cool leaders. They also have lots of traps, things like Chosen. And they also have a lot of sweet new models that come in the builds you don't want. For example, new Chaos Warriors don't have the dual wield option. They're just like weapon plus shield. And you want to be able to get some dual wields in there, but you can't anymore. I assume the dual wielding Chaos Warrior will be sunsetted once we get to 3rd edition, but for now you can still play it, you just can't buy it, which is weird. Also, new Ogroids, they're incredible, but they're not in the game yet, which is very, very sad. Let's build some lists with them. The first is if I were going to go into the Rumble Pack, Slaves to Darkness are one of the factions that can exist in an all objective mission environment. 8 Marauders, Dark Oath War Queen, a Bloodkind, and a Chaos Warrior. They're playing the game of flood the board with chaff that's hard to remove. Be good at removing your chaff, right? Dark Oath War Queens have that AoE attack buff. Bloodkinds have only 3 attacks, but it's 3/8, and so giving them +1 attack is really huge from the War Queen, and so you can War Queen and then buff them up with Onslaught, and the Bloodkind, once it's getting +2 attacks there, it can go toe to toe with anything in the game when it's being double buffed like that. The War Queen also can help out your Marauders. They have that 3-inch range, so you can really get big clouds of +1 attack with this setup. So just a very solid Rumble Pack setup that you can do, or even a tournament, even a balanced tournament where you're expecting 2 objective missions. You can absolutely bring this type of warband, think, okay, I'm going to be hugely advantaged against, say, a 7 or 8, even a 9 model warband in the objective missions. And now I've just got to really focus on playing my Bloodkind perfectly in the other 2 missions. You can absolutely do that and still do really well at a tournament and, win the 2 objectives, split the other 2 missions, and that's a 3-1. That's really good. Um, Another really cool playstyle you can do with Slaves to Darkness is missiles. I got this idea from Justin Orton actually, but two Varanguards just together, they can, because they have that 10-inch move, they can go and 2-on-1 any fighter they want on the board that's not on terrain, and they will win. Two Varanguards can delete just about anything, especially because each one is going to be coming in using its double. You come in 10 inches, gets you to where you want to be, you attack it, you use your double, you do a ton of damage, then the other Varangard comes in, does the exact same thing. Most things, anything that doesn't have toughness 6 in the game, it's going to get deleted when this happens. So, um, really incredible and really good at punishing uh, any warband that's relying on like one heavy hitter, something like that, or like uh, he was telling me that this would be really good against Calthea because, like, you're relying on Calthea as sort of the center of this storm in a Stormcast list, and the Varangard are going to be able to sort of run to the center, punch in, kill Calthea. Now, they don't fight Annihilators well at all. They will eventually get killed by the Annihilators, but Annihilators don't remove them easily either, so it'll be like a really long fight, and your Marauders and Chaos Warrior will hopefully be able to score points because of all that gravity that happens. So a lot you can do with two Varangard, but also be aware that, against a list that isn't relying on just one fighter, this will be a little bit less effective. I wanted to make a sweet narrative list for Slaves to Darkness because I think, the game is Slaves to Darkness themed. I think they are the perfect sort of distillation of what, Warcry is about. And so here is my path to glory list. A Chaos Lord, an aspiring champion, Chaos Warrior with dual weapons, three with sword and shield, and then three Marauders. You have every level of the path to glory in this list, all the way from lowly Marauders up to the Chaos Lord. You have your second in command in the aspiring champion, which is a Chaos Warrior champion. The only thing you don't have here are Chosen because Chosen are so bad in the game right now. GW, please, you have this beautiful new sculpt. Please give them um, a beautiful new stat line, a beautiful new lease on life. Even if it was just like +1 damage, that would make them really good. Um, but yeah, they just need something. They need just one of their stats to tick up by one, whether it's one more attack, one more damage on their current attacks, maybe, a few more wounds, something like that. Just something to make them a little bit more interesting. Now let's get into Tzeentch. Tzeentch Arcanites are kind of interesting. They're one of the factions that has, I think, if not the lowest win rate in the game of factions that get played a lot. It's pretty close. Now, the main reason for that is Carrick Acolytes. Carrick Acolytes are, if not the worst fighters in the game, they're pretty close. And a lot of people play them because they look really cool. Now, the highlights on Tzeentch are Zangors. They're a pretty cheap 15 wound chaff. You can get pretty creative with the rest of your list, knowing that 225 points is going to get you 45 wounds that can move pretty quick around the board and give you a ton of list building flexibility. They have a few cool leaders too. The Curseling, the Ogroid, the Aviarch on disc. Those are all pretty cool. They have a lot of lowlights though. Their abilities are not good at all in Tzeentch, which is weird. The only real ability that's good at all is the one for the Aviarch on disc. Every other ability is unusable, which is kind of too bad. Their leaders are generally pretty expensive for what they do. Even the Ogroid Thaumaturge has a really cool ability, but not actually that useful. It's like really, it reads really cool, but at the end of the day, it's just onslaught. And so it's paying a lot of points for an ability that sounds cool but doesn't do anything. And so every leader is kind of just a little bit more expensive than they should be, even though they're pretty cool. Also, Zangors are great, but they won't outfight the best chaff in the game, or even, one notch below the best chaff in the game. Like they won't outfight Gut Rippas even, and Gut Rippas are good, but they're not number one in the game, right? They're not like Plague Bearers, they're not Skeletons, they're not Arcanauts, right? They won't necessarily outfight chaff, even though they're nice at just running around the board and being hard to kill. The Tzeentch list that I played most recently, I played this to a tournament. I went not very well, actually. This was the only tournament I've been to where I didn't come out with a winning record. I went 1-1-1 with a Curseling, a Fulmoroid Crusher, a Myrmidesh Painmaster, four Zangors, and a Zangor with Shield. I actually have played them enough where I really like Zangor Mutants. They're just kind of hard to fit in lists because they're 85 points. The Zangor Great Blades at 105 have been really bad for me. I just think the sort of nice thing about Zangors of being sort of 15 wounds at 75 points and being able to move around the board, once you're at 105 points, T315 is not impressive anymore, and so when a Great Blade dies without ever getting to attack, you really feel it. Um, my MVP with this list, unfortunately, was the Myrmidesh Painmaster. The Curseling is pretty good, but it's one of those things where it's overpaying for its ranged attack. And so, a Curseling at 195, at 185 would be really, really good, but at 205, it's just expensive. And then, the Fomeroid Crusher is really, really solid, but people can kind of key in on it because your Zangors are not scaring them from an output standpoint. And so maybe you need a little bit more oomph there. That's where I was. Cutting the Aviarch was a really painful decision. It is really good when it's good, but it's pretty fragile. It can't go toe to toe with other Titan level fighters, and it's 275 points. It won't just the incredible burst damage it has costs a triple and doesn't happen against every fighter type. Against anything that's toughness 5 or higher, those things are essentially immune to an Aviarch, which is a little bit tough. The sort of burst damage doubles that Varangard and Achelian Kings and the FEC guy, the Vargulf, those are just much scarier, I think, point for point than what the AVRC has. It's kind of just one step below. Now, it's incredible at blowing up, say, support heroes, things like that, things like a shard speaker from Slaanesh, stuff like that, but you just don't have a target for it in every game, and so that's why I cut it. If you wanted to lean into Zangors, you can do that and be pretty scary on objective missions, right? With six Zangor, two Zangor Mutant, an Enlightened Aviarch on foot, which is really just a big Zangor, and then a Slaughterborn with Great Axe is a very sort of foot slogging list that isn't as painful for foot slogging and kind of highlights what Zangors are good at. And I just put that there to give you kind of a competitive option that's different than what I played before I get into the most beautiful meme list, which is Ogroid Tribal, an Ogroid Thaumaturge, two Myrmidons, two Zangor Mutants, and a Zangor. Ogroids look perfect in Tzeentch because Zangors have horns too, and so the Ogroids fit perfectly. And then, you're just bringing a lot of beef here, a lot of heavy hitters, and just going in and smashing. It's like completely different than how Tzeentch normally plays, but it's pretty darn cool. And I would love to try to play this sometime. The last faction I'm going to cover today is Tzeentch Demons. The highlights are power projection. Every fighter in Tzeentch Demons can reach across the board, whether it's because Screamers are ridiculously fast, or every fighter has a ranged attack, or you have Pyrocasters, which are like a real artillery piece. And they also have a really cool gimmick. Split is really cool. I know AOS players are sick of splitting because it's been like oppressive so many times in Age of Sigmar, but in Warcry it's never been oppressive, and it's just really funky and clever and fun to play with. They also have a great color scheme. My Slaanesh is all painted in the Tzeentch color scheme because I just love the Tzeentch color scheme so much. Um, the lowlights on Tzeentch are their total output is kind of in a rough place. They just don't do much damage. They all cost a lot of points, for what they do. I think they're costed like Split is amazing. And also building to the gimmick is hard because Split is a reaction. So you have to tempt your opponent into attacking a fighter that hasn't activated yet. Luckily, just a week ago, or maybe 2 weeks ago by the time you see this video, A wonderful sunbeam came down from the clouds and showered heavenly energy onto Tzeentch, and that is divine blessings, because you can make all of your Tzeentch fighters spiteful. Now it costs 30 points. I wouldn't do it on every fighter, but would I take one blue horror out of my list to give three of my fighters a free reaction? Because that is what Spiteful does. Spiteful is the divine blessing that lets you once per battle round, though it doesn't matter here, but once per battle round, you get a free reaction on this fighter, and you pay 30 points for it, which is a lot. Most factions in the game would never think about paying 30 whole points to get a free reaction, but Tzeentch would absolutely do that. So if you have a spiteful iridescent horror, two spiteful pink horrors, that means your opponents cannot kill them without them splitting into two blue horrors. Those are the ones that they want to get off the board the most. So now they're your pink horrors. You can freely activate with them early, get your sort of slightly higher impact activations out there, forcing your opponent's hand, putting your opponent in a slightly more sort of annoying situation. And then you don't have to worry about the fact that you've already activated with them. You have this free reaction. So now when they kill your guys and you're in their face threatening them, they need to kill your guys. Now you have that split that you can still do even though you've already activated. It will completely, now I haven't tested it, but I do have pink horrors and an iridescent horror that I am going to play this in my next sort of casual game in. You can get these free splits and just flood the board with blue horrors. Then you also have five blue horrors that you know you won't be activating till later in the round, so you might still be able to split with them. Um, because you're flooding the board with blue horrors, you will be able to, eventually you're flooding the board with blue horrors because all these pinks are turning into two blues when they die. You'll eventually, late in the game, just have tons of blues, tons of brims all over the place. Divine Blessings, I'm thinking, in theory, Divine Blessings completely revolutionize how Tzeentch Demons operate, and it's going to be really good for them. For other things, you can do a lot of really good stuff with pyrocasters. I'm a really big believer in pyrocasters as an ally for sort of tough, fighty factions that don't have a lot of reach. I think pyrocasters are one of the best ways to sort of reach out and touch your opponent without necessarily having a lot of speed otherwise. So a pyrocaster, an exalted flamer of Tzeentch, and then a slaughter priest who can grab and drag things around. You will be able to catch your opponent anywhere. This is going to be an incredible list for treasure missions, for example. And then just rounding it out with blue horrors and brimstones for activations and just a little bit more reach because they all have ranged attacks as well. Let's get a little bit less memey with our split list. This list was just pure horrors and nothing but horrors. In terms of actually an effective list, I think we can do a little bit better. If you have a pyrocaster, which is the best fighter that Tzeentch has access to, and then two spiteful pink horrors, two brimstones, a blue, and then a bloodkind with dual axes, which can give you like a heavy hitter that actually puts some fear into your opponent. This is a list that's able to do a lot more things on the field and kind of threaten your opponent in a lot more different ways. And those pink horrors are still going to be threatening. They can run up into your opponent. They can sort of put your opponent in an awkward situation if they don't kill the pink horrors, and then you get your free split, which is going to be really good. Now, from less memey to more memey, this is the more meme version of that last sort of double flamer list. If you, instead of having a slugger priest, which is probably the more effective fighter in terms of playing to your strengths, if instead you bring a true blood, which has the guaranteed net, the net ties one fighter to the stake. They cannot move, they cannot hide from your flamers, and then all of your flamers just burn them down with all your brimstones and your pyrocaster and your exalted flamer, all just flamethrowering the one thing you've tied to the stake. It's incredibly fluffy, it's incredibly Tzeentch. A lot of Tzeentch's themes are about setting things on fire to change them. Um, It's a lot like the previous Slaughter Priest list. It's just maybe a little less powerful and a lot funnier. So I'll end today with a sweet meme list. This video has gotten long, gotten away from me a little bit, but um, a lot of really cool stuff that you can kind of do with these factions in Chaos, the second half of Chaos. So I think it was worth it. I'm going to be finishing the lists for every faction series over the course of the summer. So you can expect those. And until then, may all your rolls be crits.